Milwaukee Bucks fans, welcome back to Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. I'm your host, Dean Simon. Please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, so first off, the Los Angeles Lakers steal another Bucks would be target, even though the roster is currently filled at the moment, by signing Marcus Smart after he came to a contract buyout agreement with the Washington Wizards. He signed to the Lakers for 2 years, $11 million, basically the same exact contract that Bradley Beal got from the LA Clippers after a buyout from the Phoenix Suns. So Marcus Smart now pairs in the backcourt with Luka Doncic, gives them their dog on defense to kind of hide Luka on that end of the floor, help him conserve his energy for the offensive end. And though again the roster is currently filled at the moment, all 15 slots for the Bucks roster are taken up after the re-signing of Chris Livingston and several other decisions being made, though things could be up for change, that the future's kind of up for interpretation based on if the Bucks decide to waive certain guys, and more decisions could be made later on in the offseason and going into training camp. But for now the roster is filled out, though Marcus Smart would have been an interesting addition for a team like this, even though they've been pushing for youth with the re-signing of Kevin Porter Jr., of Ryan Rollins, especially at the guard spots. That those guys are, I won't say necessarily that Kevin Porter Jr. is going to lead the Bucks into the future, but Ryan Rollins has more of a shot of doing so, and doing so through his defense. And Marcus Smart definitely for the now would have been a great option to stand beside Giannis on the defensive front and help the Bucks potentially creep into top 5 defense in the NBA territory. Though, of course, Marcus Smart is dealing with his own injury struggles, and it's not a given necessarily that he's going to play an entirely healthy year in 2025-26 for the Lakers alongside LeBron, alongside Luca. Though his talent on the defensive end is still undeniable. Of course, 2022 Defensive Player of the Year, I believe multiple time all defensive team, I think up to 3 all defensive team selections. But regardless, one of the best perimeter defenders at the point guard position in the NBA over the past half decade to 6 7 years. And of course things dropped off dramatically after he left the Celtics via trade, and then of course bounced around, went to the Grizzlies, had a pretty broken injury year for the Grizzlies, then traded to the Wizards, doesn't really play the rest of the year. But Marcus Smart, heading into this offseason, he was looked at as a potential, not necessarily marquee free agent, but of the players in this class, he was looked at as one of the most impactful and, high upside signings of free agency for any prospective team, just simply due to his defensive intensity and, of course, that the track record of how excellent he is on the defensive side of the ball. So the Bucks, of course, miss out on another free agent target. Yes, they would not have been able to sign him at this moment because the roster's filled, but if they had made some decisions earlier on and really tried to jump at Marcus Smart, I don't think it would have been a terrible acquisition for the Bucks. Anyways, moving forward, uh, again, will say that the Bucks roster is full, but with the possibility of maybe waiving a guy like Andre Jackson Jr., who of course got his guaranteed contract for this year pushed back all the way to opening night of 2025-26. Originally, that guaranteed contract was supposed to come into effect, I believe, for this season salary on the 7th of this month, but of course gets pushed back to the beginning of the season, so it gives the Bucks a little bit more financial flexibility. Now only about $800,000 of Andre Jackson's 2.2 or $2.3 million salary is guaranteed. So there's still the chance that he could be waived, especially after a pretty subpar summer league performance. Not saying that 4 or 5 games in the summer league define a player, especially as young as Andre Jackson Jr., with all the potential he has on both sides of the ball, just his sheer athleticism and length, especially on defense, and that he's developing a 3 point shot. But that's besides the point. If Andre Jackson were to potentially get waived by the Milwaukee Bucks, it's not too far out of the realm of possibility, in my opinion, that the Bucks could target Victor Oladipo, as he's made headlines recently that he is aiming for an NBA comeback. Of course, he hasn't played since the 2022-23 season as a member of the Miami Heat, became a multiple time All Star with the Indiana Pacers in 2016 2017, 2018, became one of the best young shooting guards in the entire league, was all defensive first team in 2018, I believe, most improved player, took a prime and many would argue LeBron James's absolute best of the best version of himself, his absolute peak version of himself in 2018. Victor Oladipo's Pacers took 2018 LeBron James to a game 7 in the first round. Victor Oladipo was tearing the league up in his absolute prime, and I feel like people are starting to forget just how deadly he was again on both sides of the ball. And even though now he's 33 years old, he may not be able to offer much to a team in the athletics department, in terms of just all around skill, because, these injuries are holding him back. But he could definitely still offer a lot to a potential team, though it is worth mentioning that fan side, it's Dalton Sell. He came out with an article just earlier today that basically detailed why the Bucks wouldn't want to go after a guy like Victor Oladipo, and he said, and I quote, "Essentially, every move the Milwaukee Bucks made this offseason was in an attempt to get younger. They swapped out Brooke Lopez and Pat Connaughton for Miles Turner and Gary Harris." Which I don't know if you would say that Gary Harris, the addition of Gary Harris, is really pushing for the youth movement, because Gary Harris himself is going to be 31 uh, in the next 2 3 months or so. So right as at the beginning of this next season, he's going to be 31 years old. Not necessarily the youth that we're talking about, but I get the point. Anyways, for Miles Turner and Gary Harris, while trying to keep their current youth brigade intact by re-signing Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., Jericho Sims, Ryan Rollins, and Chris Livingston, Victor Oladipo, at 33 years old, likely doesn't fit into that process. And yes, you completely get this from an age-only perspective, but the thing that I feel like people aren't thinking about is that Victor Oladipo, while that whole ESPN story came out that he's seeking a comeback, that there were private workouts held with a bunch of scouts from different teams attending, they're really impressed with his, maintained athleticism. He looks very healthy, looks skilled. Um, Victor Oladipo has said publicly, he tweeted this or he posted it on Instagram pretty recently, that he's willing to take on any role on any team in an effort to help a team win basketball games. Whether he's on the court every night, he doesn't touch the court for a second, he needs to take on a mentorship role. Victor Oladipo is willing to stop in for a team and do anything possible to fill any role necessary that could lead to him impacting winning for a certain team. And I feel like that can't be disregarded for a team like the Bucks, who, again, that Sell had mentioned, all of these young guards like Kevin Porter Jr., still even like Gary Trent Jr., still relatively young, like Ryan Rollins and even Chris Livingston, who could learn a thing or two on defense from Victor Oladipo, that he could come in and be this great veteran presence, just this great uh, teacher to these guys, just a great mentor, and that's got to be worth something for a team that is pushing for a youth movement. Those veterans in the locker room are always going to have some innate value in terms of helping these guys develop. And Victor Oladipo could easily be one of these guys that comes in and really unlocks certain things for a guy like a Ryan Rollins, who we got to see a little bit of what he can do on both sides of the ball last year. And if he did have the chance to jump into the practice facility with Victor Oladipo every day and run through certain drills and really pick his mind about certain things, Ryan Rollins could take that next step, at least as a defender. We know that he shot over 40% from three this past year, though in limited minutes. But as a defender, he has all the necessary tools there, and it just with a few more tweaks in like kind of the mental game and in terms of reaction time and things of that nature, just intangibles, Victor Oladipo could really unlock things for a guy like Ryan Rollins and even a guy like Chris Livingston. So I don't think it's impossible that a guy like Andre Jackson Jr. gets waived. Somehow a roster spot opens up and Victor Oladipo becomes this main priority as the offseason rolls along. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that maybe the Bucks, just with their last roster spot, say, "Hey, Victor, you might as well come along and teach these guys a thing or two as we're gearing up for what could be an unsuspectingly successful 2025-26 campaign and even going forward into the future." Anyways, wanted to touch on Tyler Smith just absolutely breaking out and lighting up the heat in the Bucks' last summer league game of the five. They of course lost to the Chicago Bulls, I believe the or not the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat by a score of I believe 93-92 on some last second heroics by several guys on the Heat just driving recklessly towards the basket, but somehow got these crazy bank shots to fall. Um, Tyler Smith hit back to back threes in the fourth quarter. I know this isn't encapsulating the whole game, but those back to back threes in the fourth quarter off the dribble gave him 21 points on the night, 5 boards. He hit 4 of his 6 threes. And again, off the dribble, late in the game, he was hitting some huge shots to keep the Bucks in the game. And you love to see him still confidence in his off the dribble 3 point game, because you would think that a guy who was shooting about 5.6% on threes on pretty high volume through the first 3, 4 games of the summer league, he just wasn't able to throw a rock in the ocean. You would think that he wouldn't take those moments to kind of bet on himself in those instances when the Bucks are trailing by 7, 8 points with 6 or 7 minutes left, that he would be the one to take those huge shots and drill them to keep things close, keep the game competitive, and keep the Bucks in it, with something to fight for, as they just want to come out of summer league on a high note. Of course, the Bucks didn't end up getting it done, but Tyler Smith was scoring in a variety of ways. Of course, this was the one game out of the 5 games where his 3 point shot was going down at a consistent rate at all. And I was impressed by his defense as well. On his production on both sides of the ball was pretty stellar, even though it didn't show up in the box score necessarily. He didn't register a steal, register a block. He was doing everything right in my opinion, and he was making quick decisions. He was moving his feet. He was just staying aggressive, and that's all you could really want from a guy who, a lot of guys in his situation where he hasn't seen a shot fall all of summer in Vegas at least. You would think maybe a guy would be checked out, because while his future isn't guaranteed, it's actually far from it. You would figure that, like, oh, he still has his roster spot. He isn't necessarily like fighting for his life, like for his basketball career. You would think maybe a guy like him would be checked out, at least on the defensive side of the ball. But the way that he's been able to keep his head in it and stay active on that end, and now have an opportunity to actually sink shots in huge moments of their final summer league game, it really should do a number for his confidence moving forward. And I'm sure it did a number for the front office of the Bucks confidence as well, in John Horst's confidence, because we see that he can offer so many different things on the offensive end, that he's just so athletic and versatile, and he has a handle, and just the fact that he's 6'10", 6'11", pulling up off the dribble like this with that left-handed stroke. It's really something to behold when it's actually going down. And his potential could really know no bounds. And I'm happy that he had a performance like this to close things out, to at least for himself individually end on a high note. And we'll see if it carries into 2025-26, because there's going to be a lot of minutes to be had, a lot of uh, chances potentially for him to prove that he can be a mainstay in the Bucks rotation. So we're going to have to see how he responds to that kind of thing. But anyways, last up, the Milwaukee Bucks general manager John Horst, he had that pretty famous interview with the Athletic uh, just a couple of days ago, or maybe up to a week ago now, where he was talking about the Bucks front office uh, dealings and their transactions, the move that they were able to make this offseason. And he kind of took a little bit of a break, or made a little bit of a segue during that interview to the Bucks on-court product, specifically surrounding Giannis and his ability to handle the ball and make great decisions at his size, and the way that he's just a natural and instinctive playmaker at his size, at his build. It really doesn't make sense when you think about the grand scheme of things in terms of you know typical basketball talents that you come across. But of course, Giannis is one of one, and we've known this now for as long as we can remember. But John Horst, in this interview, he gave a couple of comments as to Giannis maybe fully taking over a point guard role. And one could argue that this is where Giannis is at his best, when he's bringing the ball up the court, when he's surveying things, when he's, again, like, just driving with reckless abandon to the rim and is finding open 3 point shooters in the corners or on the wings. That's just Giannis in his natural state as a playmaker. And John Horst, he really, he drew the attention to this in this interview, and he said, and I quote, "He just continues to grow at such a high rate in generating 3 point shots for his teammates. It's elite. His decision making is elite. His turnover game is reducing. He truly is becoming a real point guard, or a real point forward, like Doc Rivers calls it." I think that allows us to dive even deeper into it than we have in the past. But I think those have always been some of our most successful lineups and groups. Speaking of Giannis out on the court with guys of AJ Green and Gary Trent Jr., Torian Prince's caliber. He continues to say that putting him out there with a bunch of shooters and ball movers and let him just dominate. You stop him, he passes it. You don't, he dunks it. And I feel like we've got a number of those guys. Of course, you see this kind of game plan from the Bucks take a meteoric rise once the postseason comes around because the playoffs, of course, when you have the other team really game planning for a 7 game series of how they're going to stop one specific person on this team and the ways in which they're going to do it, and most times that's walling up Giannis, not letting him get to the basket, so they're intentionally leaving some of the best shooters in the NBA wide open, like Gary Trent Jr., like Torian Prince this past year, like AJ Green. So going into next year, having re-signed all of those guys and really just giving Giannis more options on drive and kick scenarios, you could see next year being one of Giannis's most productive playmaking years because, of course, he did have Gary Trent Jr. this past year and Torian Prince and AJ Green and all these guys that I previously mentioned, but things are going to be a little bit different, mostly because of I don't want to say the Bucks' lack of point guard production or point guard play, because of course Gavin Porter Jr. showed some things this past year, improved as a playmaker, I would say, at least in the pick and roll. But of course, you would rather lean towards Giannis's drive and kick capabilities than kind of playing a long game and waiting to see if Kevin Porter Jr. could become a truly dominant pick and roll pairing with Giannis. You'd rather just give Giannis the ball and let him do him and drive to the basket and create opportunities for others in the ways in which we know he can do, especially again when the postseason comes around, when teams are solely focused on walling up Giannis and not letting him do anything within 3 to 5 feet of the basket. Uh, this is when this whole philosophy really comes through and where these guys like again like AJ Green, Gary Trent really thrive because all of the attention is on Giannis. It only will be on Giannis, and these guys just have to knock down open shots. And John Horst making reference to this really shows that if and when the Bucks get to the postseason this year, and maybe if they have a favorable matchup based on certain schemes that their opponent likes to run against Giannis, it could lead to a bunch of great things for the Bucks' greatest shooters, because building a wall against Giannis only works in certain scenarios, and when the Bucks can proudly say that we're gonna roll out lineups with 3 of the NBA's best pure shooters out there, and Miles Turner and Bobby Portis, and the shooting talent on this team on this roster goes way deeper than I feel like some would imagine. So putting the ball in Giannis's hands, letting him act as full-time point guard of this team, especially in the immediate aftermath of Damian Lillard's departure, it could just be the best thing for the Bucks going forward and going forward into a potentially deep 2025-26 postseason run because as we know, as we've stated in recent episodes, the East is wide open. The Bucks, you know again unsuspectingly could have a real shot at making things happen in the playoffs, and that could be through just letting Giannis bulldoze his way to the rim and kick it out to AJ Green for a corner three. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. I've been Dean Simon. Again, make sure to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. I'll see you guys in the next one. And go Bucks.